Hello and welcome to the Faces of Africa Pocket Edition, where we dissect and discuss the topics covered in our weekly documentary show, which takes you through the continent's history, cultures, and major issues through exploring great personalities. This week on Faces of Africa podcast, we are taking you to the Southern African nation of Namibia. We'll be telling you a story of the founding father of the nation, that is Dr Sam Nujoma. But I'll be having a discussion here on the podcast with Peter Denk. He is a journalist from Namibian Broadcasting Corporation. Peter, thank you so much for making time for us.
Hi, Fathiya. Thank you also for inviting me to your podcast. It's such a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you've watched the Faces of Africa documentary on the former president. What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I did watch it. And also what we did on the day of his birthday, on the 12th of May, we also had that documentary part of the lineup we broadcast on Namibian Broadcasting Corporation TV. And what I could see from the founding president was still his revolutionary zeal. It was so when he talks of the liberation struggle, he's still so fired up, and he remains like that. And also, of course, his love for education and the importance of education that he has. So that was what really was quite powerful for me in the documentary.
Well, I totally agree. Even myself watching it, I was so inspired by his love of education, like you've said it. But let's move on and talk about him as a person. Have you ever managed to interview him or met him in person?
Yes, I was just, I think, around 95, 96. I was able to accompany him. I was part of a pool of reporters from the NBC, from the Namibian Broadcasting Corporation, to accompany him on his foreign engagements. So yes, I was able to be quite close to him, and I could, I had up close and personal encounters with him as well.
I'm sure that was quite an experience, knowing that also, by the way, he's still alive at the moment. What did you think of his rule as a president during that time he was the president? Some of the stories that you remember, or just the encounters that you remember when it comes to his rule as the president of the country?
Well, of course, he had been a very decisive leader. If he had made up his mind, nothing would move him from that position. Very decisive. If he decides to move, he does that out of his conviction, and he moves very, very decisively. You know, in the documentary, you can also see how proud he was when the South African flag was lowered. The Namibian flag, a new nation, was born. When that flag was hoisted, you could see how he felt about it. Naturally, he had to be very strict, and they had to form the nation, the new Namibian nation. He had to put structures, systems, and institutions in place.
What would you say would be different right now? I mean, he left office 19 years ago. What has changed in Namibia in terms of like politics and development at the moment?
Yes, he left office 2005. And then he had President Pohamba taking over, and then also the late President Geingob also took over from President Pohamba after 10 years. Well, I think in terms of the legacy that was left by President Nujoma, in terms of setting the nation on the path to... He introduced what was called the Vision 2030. So, in short, this vision is saying that, look, by 2030, Namibia should be at the level of developed countries, where industrialization is key. We're not dependent on import so much, and that is the sort of the vision that he left. And the presidents that succeeded him built on that vision. And so, in terms of development, yes, we can see road infrastructure, I believe, is second to none in Africa. That's why we always get rated as the best in Africa when it comes to road infrastructure. Communications, I believe 76%, 80% of the country is covered. Housing is another area where we could see there has been an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, something else I think that I'd like to mention is when you watch the documentary, we have a journalist who talks about his story also in the documentary. But at some point, during his tenure, there was a bit of, I don't know if I should call a gag. What is the status of press freedom right now in Namibia?
Just by way of illustration, we went to Burkina Faso not so long ago. Namibia being the last year still being the first or the number one country in Africa when it comes to media freedom. We got a reward from the Freedom of Expression Institute in Ouagadougou. But if you, and we had, I had conversations with many people within West Africa, the journalist unions and bodies with regard to journalism. And what we would see, if you compare that to our situation in Namibia, is that we really have a lot of privileges when it comes to media freedom. No journalists have ever been arrested for doing their work.
Right. I mean, Peter, as we wrap up the conversation, I want you to tell me what you think about the current leadership in Namibia, because what is interesting, what we've seen in the recent past is after the former president passed, the late president passed early in the year, we saw the vice president taking over, but the vice president is saying he's not going to vie to be a president for the upcoming election. This is not something we see in Africa. So do you think that when it comes to democracy, Namibia is one of the countries in Africa that tops?
We have been highlighted or heralded as a beacon of democracy within Africa. Shortly after the passing of our former president, our late president, Dr. Hage Geingob, passed on, and when Dr. Bumba was sworn in, it was very clear from the start. He repeated that again to say that, look, I am here. I'm not going to stand for presidency. There is a process within the ruling party that has been completed, and there is a candidate for the ruling party. And this again is an illustration of how much we value our constitution and how much we value democracy.
From your own experience, what have you learned from the former president, Dr. Sam Nujoma?
The values of hard work, and I think honesty is what I take from him.
Thank you so much, Peter, for your time. We appreciate the conversation. Has been very interesting. Thank you.
You are most welcome, Fathiya, and thank you once again for the opportunity.
Remember, you can watch this documentary on our CGTN platforms. On Sunday, it runs live at 12:30 East Africa time, 17:30 Beijing time, and 9:30 GMT. On Monday, it will be uploaded on our YouTube channels. See you next time.